Afternoon. Caleb, you're there. You can hear me?
Yep. Hi, Joe.
Awesome. All right. So, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I should say. It's 1 o'clock here in Michigan. My name's Joe Kramer. I'm the Executive Director of the Michigan Bean Commission. With me today is Mr. Caleb Sundblad. Caleb's the dry bean marketer from Cooperative Elevator, home based in Pigeon, Michigan. So glad to have you with us today, Caleb.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's nice to be here.
Before I give you the floor and the screen, I want to say thanks for agreeing to participate with us today and kind of give us just a current snapshot of what the bean market looks like to you today. We certainly understand that things change all the time, and this is a good chance to take a look at it and just see what the temperature of the room is sort of as we speak.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Caleb, as you know, in the past, the Michigan Bean Commission has always hosted a series of dry bean production and outlook meetings, regional meetings that we hold each December. And of course, with COVID, we're not able to do that. But one of the components of that meeting agenda has always been a quick overview of the marketplace. And you've actually done that for us several times at the meeting we've had in Bad Axe, Michigan, our Eastern regional meeting, and we always appreciated that. So our plan is to do this weekly. I sort of think of this as season 1, episode 1, if you will. I think we all been watching enough Netflix to know what that means. And anyway, that's you're the maiden voyage here. So again, I appreciate that. We don't know how many sessions or how many episodes will be in season 1, but hopefully there's more than one, and you'll go down in history as being the first. So.
Well, very good. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate being here. Again, it's always a little disappointing to not be in person. Always like the meetings that you guys put on and being in front of the growers and Bad Axe. But like any good TV show, hopefully I don't lead off with the pilot and then get us canceled. So
yeah, hopefully you're right.
Yeah.
I thought that each week we would kind of try to focus on a certain segment of the marketplace. Today, just because of where I perceive your areas of responsibility are today, and you can help us understand that a little bit throughout the course of the afternoon. But I kind of thought we'd kind of focus on black beans and pinto beans.
Yep.
And I'm historically kind of a white bean guy, but I think pinto beans have such a impact on all of the markets. I always like to talk about those, even though we're not a big production state here.
Sure.
Yeah, a pinto production state in Michigan, but certainly appreciate having you take a shot at this today. So
sure. I
think we'll try to have a domestic component and export component. We can have all those pieces, and I just thought you made a lot of sense. Janowitz isn't nearly as tech savvy as you are, so you got the call anyway. But
yeah, no, I appreciate it. I will give Mike a plug. I mean, he's he's transitioned to working from home now, and he's doing really well. I mean, we have him on Zoom calls all the time, and
he's coming along for an old guy.
Yeah, we haven't seen upside his nose or looking out the window yet. So he seems like he's getting the handle of it. So
good, that's good. Well, give him our best. I'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you. I see you put some slides together for us, and I appreciate that. So the floor is yours. If I'll just point out that if someone who is viewing today has a question, pop it in the chat box. I'll keep my eye on that, and we'll do our best to get you an answer. So it's yours. It's all yours.
Okay, Joe. Yeah, no, thank you again. Great to be here. Like I said before, as you mentioned, Joe, I think the two big areas that I'll focus on today are obviously pintos and blacks. Last year was really, and 2020 in general, I mean, I won't steal everybody's cliche line, but it's really been a historic year. There's no doubt about it. And there's no doubt that it really had quite big impacts on the dry bean market. I think we've probably never seen different demand peaks and valleys that we saw in 2020. And really, we saw shifting dynamics in the market that we've never seen either. But I will say, just in general, you asked about what the temperature in the room right now is, and I'd say it's hot. I mean, I think those of us in the driving industry, we're in a growing business. We're in a strong business with strong markets. We're in a business where you're seeing just in general more demand come to the market. Plant-based proteins have certainly become in vogue, and especially so with COVID. As you've seen other protein sources like poultry and meat prices rise, supply chains really be under stress. Plant-based proteins and dry beans in general have really seen a nice push. You've also seen the Chicago Board of Trade soybean price, which I'll pull some slides up here in a second, but that's also risen significantly. So I think all the factors are there for us to, see a pretty strong year again in terms of price for dry beans. So the first slide I put together, this is just an overview. This report's put together by DW Sturt, sort of the industry standard of what people look at for projections on supply and demand. Unfortunately, the USDA does a great job of putting together balance sheets for corn, soybeans, wheat, everything that the people who trade for big money like to see.
Right.
But for those of us schmucks here in the lowly driving world, we do get production numbers from them. We do get projections, but in terms of the consumption number, that's always the number that, you're always kind of pulling from different sources. So Dan has done a nice job over the years of kind of being the guy who really puts that together. So this is the black bean numbers that he had put together. Obviously, the big one that I'll point out is 2019 and the carryover there. Probably the lowest carryover number as we get down almost under 500,000 bags that we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, a long time.
And you compare that again to what 2018's was, and really came into the year, I think, with a supply that, I think would be talked about at least is a little bit burdensome. We had production challenges in 19 out west. Certainly in Michigan, I think we had a nice year, but we didn't break any records for sure. And so that really kind of put although we came in with a big carryover, we really were not in a big position if we had a big demand increase to really be able to have a big cushion coming into 2020. And that's certainly what happened. So you see the carryover number really drop. This year in general, I think production wise, and I'll move my slide here. This is kind of some of the notes I put together, but we saw acres here in Michigan increase. I think we had nice weather. We had good. We had some challenges, I'd say, late June, to late July. We had beans that really went into sort of hit the brakes on development, but really had some nice timed rains in August, and it was kind of hit or miss depending on where you were. But I'd say in general, we had kind of a bounce back year on blacks. The quality was good. So really, I think what we produced this year, we'll have no issues on marketability. I'm not sure if if my slideshow here that I stole from an earlier presentation has North Dakota, but I'll give you sort of a general rundown of the Mindag crop year.
Great.
It was good. Let me see. I think I have Mindag here on the next slide. I do. So, we really didn't see much acreage increase on blacks.
That really surprised me.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think the majority of those acres that we saw increased out there, total dry bean acres in Mindag were up significantly, but almost all of the increases were centered around pintos.
Right.
You look at North Dakota, just as an example, planted almost half a million, if I get the number right. It was about 500,000 acres of pintos alone. So quite a big year. And, I guess I was surprised as well that we didn't see more acreage shifts, but, those guys are really big pinto growers.
Sure.
They like to grow pintos, and the price was right. And the seed was available, which was another big thing. And, they were able to plant a lot of acres. But because the acreage was really flat, we also had some issues with some unharvested crops coming out of 2019. They were taking corn off in North Dakota in April and May. So it was a real challenge.
Yeah.
the acres they did get planted again were similar to last year, but they had some real challenges. June, July time period, in Grand Forks alone, Grand Forks, North Dakota, which if you look at a map of bean production, you can kind of follow Grand Forks north and south along the Red River Valley and really see the heart of the production area. In the city, there was recorded 10 inches of rain in a 24-hour period in late May. So they had some real challenges this year. You go across the border into Minnesota, in that Oslo, Minnesota area, there were some severe weather events, tornadoes. So they had a lot of struggles. It wasn't a complete disaster, but certainly it was a crop that in many areas just did not, I think, produce or perform really the level that they had hoped.
Right.
Then you shift into September, you get some really, really chilly nights early on, which is not out of the ordinary for them. But they didn't really have, the crops weren't really mature to the level that could withstand some of that. So, we think they lost about 10, 15%, in some areas even higher to frost damage. And it's not just the acres that are damaged beyond, whatever percent that the plant's going to accept. Right. It's also those loads of beans that are coming in at, 8, 9, 10% damage that are still getting accepted. But, those weights aren't going to be sellable. Those beans aren't sellable. So there's a lot of loss there too. It's not just the stuff that wasn't even accepted, but it's the stuff that's coming off the field that's not going to be able to be shipped. So if you really look at the stuff that's going to be marketable out there, definitely, I think, 2019 was a real struggle for them, but 2020 really wasn't a banner year either on blacks. So they were up a little bit in production, but it wasn't really a home run. So those two things combined, Michigan, real strong year, but Mindac didn't really set the world on fire. We're, especially with a low carryover number, we're really not sitting on just a boatload of blacks coming into the marketing season. I think as you move forward, again, you look at some of the things that really influence demand here, especially on blacks. We did see domestic consumption in the U.S. up because of COVID, no doubt about it. I kind of already outlined a few of those things. But we also, one of the biggest things was we saw exports increase dramatically in 2020 versus the 2018-19 crop cycle. And, we saw a multitude of factors go into that. On blacks, certainly Mexico's a big market for U.S. products. We saw Mexico back in the market heavier than they were certainly for the 18-19 crop cycle. But we also saw other markets that are traditional black eaters come in even more heavily. They had a lot of government buying programs for COVID relief. There were some countries where some of the traditional providers of black beans, like China's a good example, a country that used to provide black beans to a number of different markets across the world, that has really transitioned completely out now and are now growing almost exclusively soybeans there. Some of those markets that they used to supply now are going to be backfilled or have started to become backfilled by the U.S. So, we saw import or exports dramatically rise. And I think all of these things are kind of shifting people here now to try and figure out where prices should be. There's this myriad of things going on. You saw late coming out of the 2019 crop cycle, prices at really high levels. I don't know if it's historically high price levels, but quite high. And then you saw a nice harvest here for the 2020 crop, but not something that was absolutely overburdensome.
Right.
So now I think you get people who are really trying to sort out where we should be. I'd say demand really has really carried its momentum. I think throughout the rest of the year, especially as we get back into the spring, I think demand's going to be pretty strong on blacks. I think there's a number of different things that could change the circumstances, obviously. I think we see, hopefully, some good news on the COVID front. that should, hopefully calm that situation a little bit. Um, when you talk about that, you think of people who, back in March and April, went out and sort of had this panic buy. I think of people here that stocked up on 10 cans of beans.
Yeah.
That, did we change the buying habits of those people, or is that just a one-time purchase? So those are the things I think now as we get into 2021 that are really going to start, and sort of life returns as much as possible to normal, that are going to start flushing themselves out. But no matter what happens, I think the lasting impacts of this are going to be, we definitely, went from a situation where we probably had a burdensome supply to really, we're going to be at a, more than manageable supply demand level.
It sure feels that way today, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think there's other things upcoming here that, we'll have to keep a close eye on it. I put this slideshow together, you can tell, a little bit before the elections in November, but,
Sure.
I think that certainly had a lot to do with it. We've seen the US dollar now really weaken as compared to foreign currencies. That makes those foreign buyers a lot more attracted to US product. If they're buying in US dollars, their currency is stronger against the dollar. So that's been something I think that's going to continue to push exports. I think we're seeing the next round, if you will, of some lockdowns, COVID related lockdowns in other countries. I think it's going to be interesting to see if some of these other countries have some more government buying programs and how that filters back into the US market. And again, now I think with a changing administration, you're going to see some different trade policies and foreign relations really go into effect here. It remains unclear, I guess, how much or how quickly that will happen.
Right.
But certainly that stuff is going to carry in now to 2021 and be interesting to watch. I think that was most of what I had on blacks here. I did want to throw a couple slides in before I move on to Pinos.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, are very interesting. This is one where as a seller of black beans, this is a great chart, right? And I think anybody who's involved in our industry, growers included.
Oh, it's a great story.
Oh, absolutely. This is a reason to be really, really excited about being in this space. Domestic consumption, we feel, now I had robbed this, and I give credit to the USDA ERS who put this out. But this was from 2019, in summer of 2019, the last time us as an industry were able to get together.
Right.
And, their projection was actually for flat to slightly decline domestic usage. Well, based on the carryout number, if you look at what the U.S. exported and then what we carried over, at least the estimates, you'd have to say that this number actually increased to about 1.25 to 1.3 pounds per capita.
Yeah.
So that's quite a consumption number. I mean, if you think about it, 1.25 to 1.3 pounds per capita, it's over 4 million bags of black beans consumed here in the U.S.
It's a nice bump.
Oh, absolutely. And I think if you look at this, I mean, it's pretty clear here. If you drew a trend line through this chart, you're going to continue to see growth. And I think there's a lot of drivers that contribute to this. But those drivers, I don't see those reversing anytime soon. And I also think that, again, as I mentioned off the top, some of these just in general effects that COVID's had, I think are going to drive this chart even more. So you're going to see more consumption per capita.
Sure.
So yeah, again, you're exactly right, Joe. You look at this chart, it's got to be, if you're in this business, it's got to be one of your favorites.
It's one of my favorites, if not my favorite. So
for sure.
I have a ton of questions for you when you're ready for questions.
Oh, sure. All right, I'm about wrapped up. So I'll wrap up my black spiel here. This was our export numbers. This is straight from the U.S. Department of Commerce. So as you can see, our export numbers for black beans, and this only cut off, I don't think they finalized, they may have finally done it, but they hadn't finalized the August numbers for the
I haven't
1920
seen them yet.
crop year. But I mean, this again, it tells a pretty interesting story, right? I mean, not only did we consume more domestically, but we also exported a heck of a lot more.
Yeah.
So it's again, all those things factored in show us the way to a smaller carryover headed into the 20 crop cycle. And now I think as you project forward, probably similar carryover numbers into 2021. So that's all I had really on blacks. And I guess, Joe, if you have questions here, I'll snag those before we
sure
get pintos real quick.
I guess I want to sort of lob up some topics and maybe
Sure.
just have you touch on them. So I wanted to touch on Mexico's crop.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to touch on currency. You mentioned that already, but is business hot with Mexico right now? I just want to talk about Mexico a little bit.
Okay.
And then I also thought we should talk just a little bit more depth on the quality of that inventory in Mindac, because
Sure.
we've all heard some stories about that.
Sure.
I wondered how Manitoba and Ontario weigh into this.
Sure.
I don't know if you can hit on those.
Yeah.
Just
No,
touch
absolutely.
on it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Mexico to start with, I think their crop was hotly debated. I think in general they would tell you it was okay. They definitely didn't have a banner year.
Yeah.
That much is true. You look at their current level of exports on the black side, especially on the pinto bean side as well.
Right.
I think they're probably going to import more pintos this year than they may have ever imported. So I think they definitely struggled. So and again, with the currency exchange and the exchange rate working out the way it is, I would anticipate they're going to continue to be part of the market, a large part of the market this year. Mindac crop quality, you mentioned it was, again, hot. You talk about hotly debated.
Right.
Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is a third of the crop gone? What is it? I'd say probably somewhere in that 10 to 15% range is in terms of what we expected for total production of sellable weight is probably not there. I think in general, the amount of damaged beans, amount of badly damaged beans is probably not that high, but there's certainly damage. I think it just really depends on where you go. You go more towards central North Dakota. I think those guys there, those dealers would tell you they're dealing with it more. You go back a little more towards the valley. I think they didn't have it quite as bad. Sure. But again, those were the guys, I think, towards the valley who were more affected by poor yields, drown out issues, so on and so forth. So, just in general, I think everybody there, I don't think there's one black bean dealer this year in the Mindac area who just had a bang up year. I don't think anybody's celebrating. So, Manitoba.
Same might be said for the pinto guys too, right?
Exactly. Manitoba, Ontario. Manitoba really had a nice year on blacks. I think in general, those guys would tell you they're happy. The acres weren't. They were slightly lower than the prior year. You look at Manitoba's acreage in 2020, heavily skewed towards pintos. Seeded almost 100,000 acres of pintos.
Wow.
Probably I don't know if it's a record up there, but certainly pushed a record. As a result, they actually did cut some blacks. They were similar to 19, but they did cut some. But they had good yields. I think you talk to anybody out there. 2020 was certainly a makeup year for 2019.
Sure.
Ontario, again, I think they were much like Michigan, generally happy. I'd say they probably had a little bit stronger year in terms of overall yield. I mean, if you look at the percentage share of market they are, they're not going to be a big player, but certainly I think they're going to have I don't think they had a big negative impact. I don't think they had a huge crop loss that really, people are going to have to come in and make up for.
Caleb, Cooperative Elevator, and I didn't talk to you about this in advance. I'm sorry about that. I just, curiosity question. The scenario that you're kind of describing to me suggests if I'm a grower, I got to feel pretty good about being in a pool today, don't I?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a long way left, right? But I think today, I think you'd be pretty happy. I mean, you look at sort of where we were at harvest. I think when you saw how big the yields were here in Michigan, I think if you saw sort of what the expectations were in Mindac for really a nice year, I think you definitely thought prices were going to be on the retreat. I think if you were a grower, especially if you're harvesting, really, really large yields, you're probably thinking, okay, well, it's going to be a struggle to find good prices. But I think as we've let the year play out here, and again, I still go back to, we've had some conversations internally, when you start looking at where we're at for the marketing year, so much it seems like has happened already. It's only beginning of December, right? We got a long ways to go. So, it's I think as you let things play out here, as a grower, I think one of those things where you probably were pretty bearish at harvest, and now you've probably gotten pretty bold up here through the next 2 months.
I was talking with a grower, I don't know, late last week, and I think he said something to me that was really wise. He talked about I was talking about being patient in the market, and he was saying, yeah, I want to be patient, but I also think we need to continue to supply the market. We need to be part of that supply chain. And I guess I thought that was really wise of him. The pool, I guess, would allow you to do that and still take advantage of some upside for the grower.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we always want to be able to be part of the market, like you said. I mean, I think that's sort of our philosophy, is that we're always going to be somebody who's able to be involved and have some product available. Certainly there's obviously, you take more aggressive, you're less aggressive, whatever it is as things dictate. But and that's one thing, as I mentioned, it's only the beginning of December, so we got a long ways to go. And where I sit here today, I don't think people are going to slow down needing beans for the next X amount of months. So,
we talk about all the time. We talk about the fact that the grower base, whether it's Michigan or Mindac, is historically somewhere between half and 2/3 sold by Christmas time. I certainly think we're going to get there this year as well. So as we look at that last third, if you will, and say January forward, going out the rest of the crop year, it would feel like those growers got some opportunities, dealers as well, to move things. Do you kind of see those two markets working their way together? I mean,
I think I do, Joe. I think one of the things that's going to be interesting to watch here going forward, and I think you're already starting to see it a little bit, is what the projections for 2021 are going to be and how that sort of impacts what current markets are going to reflect. One of the things that I noted earlier is you see, and soybeans, I guess, are still up today. Earlier, they were down 12 cents. But, as you see that the soybean price, particularly current crop, but also new crop to a certain extent. I think this morning cash here at the elevator were about $9.80 for new crop soybeans per bushel. You're getting growers who are going to start making decisions based on that.
Sure.
So, you're going to see the spread. And I think last year you saw spread between current and new crop that, as you got later into the spring, certainly was probably one of the biggest spreads we've seen between what current values were and what new values are. How is last year's experience plus the experience of, we saw big spreads, current crop really expensive, new crop less expensive. and then all of a sudden now current crop gets expensive again. How are those experiences sort of going to influence what the market sees as a value for new crop and how that reflects on current prices? But I would agree with you. You know, I think that there's going to be opportunities here for people that have unsold beans to, you know, probably see strong prices. Again, I think it just now depends on how things play out. And, you know, it's crazy as it is to say, we're going to start talking about what the projected soybean planting acres number is going to be at the end of March, sooner rather than later. So, yeah,
I think, you know, I hear from growers a lot like you do. I'm sure they're paying attention to Chicago. They're trying to manage the risk that's associated with a specialty crop like dry beans. Their input costs don't appear to be going down. There's some uncertainty, if you will, with the new administration and what that impact could have. So I think guys are really staring at diligently at that cost of production worksheet and trying to figure out where they go. I'm certainly a dry bean guy, as you know, and so I think the final chapters of the 2020 crop and how the grower is treated moving through the balance of this year also weighs into that. And I can calculate or at least forecast what some of those other things will be. And I'm just kind of anxious to see the first and second quarter, if you will, of 2021 and how that sorts itself out in the bean market. But
no, absolutely. And I think you are seeing a lot of guys who are doing that math right now, no doubt about it. But they're weighing a lot of things, you know, they're weighing, okay, what, you know, what's actually going to be my final price for this year's crop? You know, what chances do I have to sell some new crop? What are my gut feelings going forward? You know, I think those things are really going to determine, what the attitude is right now. I'd say Michigan Agribusiness puts out a nice newsletter each week, and one of the blurbs they had on it this week was that this is the and I have to give credit to my colleague here, my coworker Michelle Bergman, who runs our grain department. She actually brought this up this morning, so I can't take total credit, but I did see it on the newsletter. But this is the highest projected farm income average since 2013.
I saw that.
So, you know, there's I think a growing sense of, I wouldn't say I don't know what the word is, but it's certainly not as maybe desperate or anxious or nervous as you've seen in prior years where, you know, there were definitely some trying times, you know, when we had soybean prices in the 7s, we had corn prices, sometimes cash prices with a 2 in front of them locally, you know, where one, it was easier, I think, to pick up dry bean acres. And we didn't have to be, the prices weren't as high. But also, I think you saw decisions made a lot more too based on input costs, what I can guarantee some return on. And now I think there's going to be a little bit more from a grower attitude. There's going to be a little bit more ability to wait or to make some decisions that aren't as critical to, you know, am I going to break even this year or not? So I think that's good. That's a good thing for all of us.
Caleb, I'll just interrupt you there. If we're running really tight on time, probably 5 minutes over what I promised you already, Caleb. I'm sorry about that. But if somebody's got a quick question, throw it in that chat box. But while we're waiting for that, Caleb, I just want to tell you, great job today. I think you always do a nice job with your presentation. It's very thorough, and I appreciate you being willing to come on here and help us with this. We might come back to you to see do a little follow up at some point. It feels like as I always say, it's a great time to be in the bean business, and I think we're going to enjoy some decent months. I'm optimistic about the next few months, and I'm still optimistic about next year. I think the dry bean demand and the dry bean market will step up to compete with corn and soybeans, and I'm optimistic about that. So, listen, I'm not seeing anything in the chat box unless I'm looking in the wrong spot. But again, appreciate your help. Appreciate the folks at the co-op keeping growers competitive. We thank you very much. Give our best to Michelle too, and
we'll do.
We'll go from there. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Take care.